YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Taicho, and that's my Dark Lord X. Join us as we continue our journey to conquer the Undernet. As cringe as that little dance was, we're just gonna jump right into it. In the last video, we left off with the data table that you can see here. We worked pretty hard to web scrape the wiki fandom arc data for One Piece. We can see that here. We have the link, the volume start, the volume end, volume count, and then those same start and count for chapter and episode. So for this video, figuring to keep it pretty short, we're going to do the same exercise that we did for the saga data, where we import or we create a table in SQL Server and we import this data that we web scrape using Python. So we have 4 steps to do this. X is going to help us. As you know, we have the Dark Chipidus, which enables us to expedite the code writing that we do. And so I've laid out these 4 steps here. We have the first step, which is going to be essentially inputting our connection variables. We have to establish a connection between Python and SQL Server. The second step, which is going to be one of the primary steps, is creating a table and defining those columns. That table that we create in SQL should look exactly the same as the data frame here, so meaning the same amount of columns, the column names and such, and what the variable types will be. From there, we're gonna insert the rows. So we're gonna have a little clip that loops through this data frame and writes the rows to the table that we create, and that'll essentially create the table content. And then the final step, we're just going to commit, which is basically confirming the steps that we decided to do and close our connection. Cool. So without further ado, let's get started. So X, if you could be so kind, if you could print out the script for us using the Python Kajibidis to establish our connection to SQL Server. So here we go. We have this one variable, start time. I'm going to use this to essentially measure how long it takes. And then from there we have our connection string. So this is going to be the string that Python uses to locate the SQL Server database that we want to write to. From there we establish an ODBC connection to that string that we have. So this will actually initiate that connection, and then the next part we have is this cursor function, and the cursor function with that connection is what enables us to execute SQL script within Python. So cool, so that's the very first step. Pretty straightforward, really just establishing a connection to where we want to write it. For the second step, X, if you could create, or if you could provide the code for us to create a table in SQL Server, as well as the data definition language we need to create the same rows that we have here in our data frame. Sorry for my... Awesome. And so here we have our second part. Using the cursor that we established up here, we can use this execute function to actually execute the SQL script, and that can be multiple scripts denoted by the semicolon. Whenever creating tables, I usually just put the drop table just in case I have it there and I want to just overwrite it. For this example, I don't have it, but I do have it generally as first part of my data definition language. And then from there, we have the second and primary step. We're going to use this create table function. We're going to call it arcs. And then within that create table function, we denote the different columns that we want in that table, as well as the variable type. So we have link varchar 150 characters. Basically, variable characters is a more flexible data type, so it can handle integers, decimals, string types, even dates. I've run into issues before in this method of how I've looked to export data to SQL Server, and basically just using a varchar for every variable type has just worked for me. But you can see, so you can see every column here pretty much corresponds to the columns that we have down here, which I believe is about 11 total. 9 kind of numerical or integer variables, and then 2 other non-count stuff. But awesome. So this is what we'll create our table, and then that'll essentially be a blank table, but that's kind of useless for us. So for the sake of analytical purposes, we need to actually get the data in here. And so X, if you could be a boss and produce the for loop for us, that'll allow us to iterate through each row in the data frame and insert the values into the SQL Server table, that'd be great. Cool. So here we go. We have a for loop. We've been using a lot of for loops throughout this series, but they work well enough for us. And basically what it's saying is, I'll start here. We're going to insert into the database object arcs, which is the table that we've created up here, these columns. And into those columns, the values we want to insert is the corresponding row number for the columns in our data frame. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to start with the first row, Romance Dawn, with its volume, chapter, episode info. It's going to insert that into the table. It'll move to the next row, insert that into the table, and so on and so forth. And then we'll have our ARCS database table. And then the final step, X, if you could be so kind to just give us the code so that we can close out the connection, as well as know how long it'll be. So here are, the final clips to the script. Basically, we're committing the changes that we've made to the database, essentially confirming that, hey, everything we've written into the database we want to commit, we confirm, and pretty much save it there. Then we want to close, our connection and our cursors. Basically, you just don't need it open using processing power and such like that. And we'll print out the time that it takes to do this. And so I'll actually, rather than write the time from here, I kind of want to just see if we can see how long the whole script takes from end to end. So let's run this and see if we got action. Awesome, so we can see it took 19 seconds, so about, pretty quickly to go to the One Piece Wiki fandom, web scrape every arc, grab that link, go back to, grab those links, put them in a list, access the list, and then for each link in there, go and scrape the relevant data points that we've denoted, which is the volume, chapter, and episode information. And then after that, produce a table. So you can see I didn't have it here prior. And now if I just refresh, go to tables and arcs, set the top 1,000 rows, bam! We now have the One Piece arc data. So this is our second table in the database, which is pretty cool. Romance Dawn, the first arc, Orange Town arc, Seer Village arc of Koro, Baratie, we get Sanji, Arlong Park, I think probably one of the first main arcs in terms of establishing themes in One Piece. And then Logtown, and then we go to Reverse Mountain, ending East Blue Saga, starting the Alabasta Saga with Whiskey Peak, and so on and so on. And then we can see, the start and end for those, for the volumes. You can kind of see the chapter counts here. Let's see if we can pick out any long ones. We see 63 for Alabasta, 66 for Skypiea. Let's guess how many chapters are in Wano. A lot. So that's cool. We have some pretty cool arc data here. Let me know your least favorite arc in One Piece. And just to do a little bit more exploring, we now have 2 tables. So we started with 11 rows at the saga level, and then we've increased our granularity to now include the arc level, which I think is pretty cool. We have some blanks that we'll have to clean up, probably remove this, and then input some values here. But yeah, that'll about do it for this video. I hope you're enjoying the series as we grow our database and start to do more review and analysis kind of videos. In our next sequence, what we'll look to do is actually merge this arc data with the saga data so that we could see at every step of the way where what arcs are in each saga, and kind of just enrich the data that we have so that when we go to do analysis we have more fields to play with. But yeah, until next time, Taicho out.